In the late 1800s, logging cars came into play to allow lumber companies to go into areas of the woods far away from the rivers. We'll talk about that and more fun logging car facts as I sketch this little final destination. So let's just turn the page and get started. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning on a Monday morning. Good morning, Claudia. Claudia's in the chat room. It's lunchtime for her. Good morning, good morning, good morning. 5:30 in the morning on Monday mornings is when I like to do a little thing where I pull a toy from the toy box, a random object from the Random Object Randomizer, if you will, and I sketch it and we talk about it. And today's random object from the Random Object Randomizer is a logging car from the rail set, from the train set.
Claudia and Joe.
Good morning, Joe. Long time no see, buddy. Logging cars come into play late 1800s. Really come into play about in the 1890s as steelworking becomes readily available. But when they first came around, they were two what they call trucks. The trucks are the in this instance when they say trucks are the axles. If you've ever had a skateboard, you know that when you talk about trucks, you're talking about the wheels and axles. You're not talking about what we call trucks today, the big trucks that haul things. That's the modern definition of trucks, but it used to be that a truck was just an axle with wheels on it. And there would be two of them. And they would be latched to the logs. The logs would actually be the body of the car. However long the logs were is how long the car could be. And so it would look like whole forests would be removed at one time. It would look like just whole forests were being taken down at one time, because the length of the trucks would just look like they were unending. Because the tree would be, it's unprocessed. It's all they've done is knocked it down and trimmed off the limbs and thrown it on the trucks. That's how it started. But that turned out to be unstable, so they didn't stick with that design. By 1908, they had a skeleton body. The trucks had the cars had a skeleton body to keep them together, to keep the trucks from moving out from underneath the logs, because they would work their way out without any kind of fastening. They would work their way loose, and everything would collapse.
Joe said his wife was on vacation for a week, so he was asleep to work.
That sounds like a good time to me. I mean, what?
Rick's here.
Good morning, Rick. I actually have a button programmed for you. You right there. I have an updated Stream Deck, and it went from 6 buttons to 15 buttons. And what am I going to do with these other buttons? I know what I'll do. And so I assigned a button to you and Pamela, and I assigned a button to Claudia. I
You
may.
have to correct the button on Claudia.
Why doesn't it say good afternoon? Oh, it says Claudia. Hey, I'm gonna have to fix that. Sorry, Claudia. Claudia. Can I see? I can't see. Can't see the wheels on that thing. I'm not sure the wheels are visible on that.
What does that button do?
It just says. It just types in. Good morning. Good afternoon, Claudia. That's it. That's all it does. It's just. It's just goofiness. I can do stuff like I can say good morning, mom and dad, or let's see, that's the wrong one. I can say delete. I can say this one. Good morning, dad and mom. And I don't have to take my hands off anything. I can just hit the button. I can say good morning, Ivy. I can just say good morning, Ivy. But Ivy's not here.
Here's it for Claudia. She's Claudia Rossi, and her sister-in-law is Claudie.
I'll fix it. I'll fix it before the day's over. It's just.
No, she's just talking about the there's only one letter difference between her name and her sister-in-law's name. She ends in an A and her sister-in-law ends in an E. That'd be confusing.
That would be confusing.
It's kind of like two Jonathan Mannings.
Are there other Jonathan Mannings? Oh yeah, there's at least one other.
Yeah, that's an insurance nightmare.
Talking about my son. My youngest son is a Jonathan Manning also. They loaded these things with a piece of equipment called a McGriffert. It's a mechanism, big, tall, long-legged mechanism that would stand up over the train and straddle the train and would crane the logs up onto the train body, and then it would roll forward to the next car and crane the logs up again, or the train would move underneath it and it would crane the next set of logs up. Wish I could describe to you, wish I could show you how interesting that thing looked.
Joe's going to be in Texas at the end of the month for 3 hours.
What part of Texas? Dallas?
No, his flight has a layover in Houston.
When?
He just says the end of the month.
You'll be trapped at the airport.
He's going to Nicaragua.
Ooh.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. I miss traveling like that. I miss going to exotic places like Minot, North Dakota, and Midland, Texas. I miss doing stuff like that. I was in sales for a little over 20 years. I don't miss being away from home all the time, but I miss going out and seeing places like that. So it used to be when they would go in and cut down the big trees in the forest, they'd have to drag them down to the river and then use the river to float them down to the sawmill. That was about the only way they could transport the big logs any meaningful distance. Until this process comes along. And they would come in and they would put tracks in to the middle of the operation, and then they just use mules to haul the trees over to the tracks, load the train up, send the train car down the rail. And when they were done cutting in an area, they'd actually pull the tracks up and move them to the next location. I never thought about moving the tracks. I'm gonna be honest with you. That was a new discovery. I was yesterday years old, or rather Friday years old when I figured out that they pulled the tracks up when they were done. I always just assumed they moved further into the forest and built more tracks. But you know, the truth of the matter is I never thought about it. It was not something I sat around and said, I wonder what they do with the railroad tracks when they're done logging. Oh, there's a siren. We should stop in color. Ooh, this is my favorite part. This is the part that brings the whole thing to life. So here it's just lines on the page. You start doing this, and it becomes a dimensional object. Probably never told you guys how much I love this part before. I absolutely love this part. This is my favorite part of the whole process. Except I can't figure out what happens to my paint. I mix my paint up, and then I go to dip my brush in it, and it's gone. Figure that out. Talk, Artie. That's not near dark enough. And all of my dark paint is just gone. There must be a crack in this pan. Honestly, I think there has to be a crack in this pan. There's no other explanation as to why that paint is not there.
You're way off camera.
Sorry.
Be center.
How'd that happen? All right.
Go to draw this with paint this on using an easel.
Why is that?
You turn your book.
I have to turn my book because I have there's only certain directions I can make a straight line. I have to turn my book because there's only certain directions I can make a straight line, and so I have to turn my book so I can do it. If I'm using my whole arm, I can make a straight line in multiple directions. But when I'm just using my wrist, there's an arc to my motion, and so I have to turn my book so that I can make the straight line with my wrist. Let me dry this real quick. Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. That was the wrong button. I need that button. Joe, I got so caught up in the shading details, I forgot to talk about the train car. The train car, this train car is steel. This train car is the original train cars were wooden frames with steel wheels, and they were just two trucks that they tied onto the ends of the logs, and then they figured out that didn't work too well, and so they moved to steel trucks, and they did that for a little while, and then they figured out that didn't work out too well because it wasn't too stable. And then they moved to the skeleton frame, which is like a long stick between the two trucks, sometimes adjustable, sometimes not. They moved to the fixed frame, and then they moved to more of a flatbed frame. So it really kind of depends on what era and what train company you're dealing with as to what the thing was made out of. This one that we're drawing is a steel flatbed with rails for the logs. This is a more modern version. This is probably a 60s version. Judging by the shape of the rest of the train and the set, this is part of the Safari train set. And so just judging by the rest of the rest of the cars in the set, this is more of a 1960s era logging car. So it appears to be more of a steel flatbed with rails for the wood.
Joe says that his stepdad worked for the Katy MSK down there in Muskogee. He rode on the caboose.
Ah! How cool is that?
Missing the cabooses.
Yeah, they took cabooses off trains. In green for the train car to highlight the difference between it and the vermilion. And then we'll
put cameras back there?
And then we'll tie it together. Say what, Mom?
Did they put cameras on the back of trains?
I don't know. Joe's probably a better person to ask about that. I am in Houston, Joe. Joe's probably a better person to ask about that because I know in the 90s I used to work for a hotel, and one of the things we did at the hotel was we had the limo service for the trains as they came through Chickasha. The trains can only run the people working the trains can only work so many hours, and then wherever they are, they have to stop and shut down. And so the trains would contract with us to go pick their guys up and take them to the station or to the hotel overnight. And I remember the guys that ran the caboose not having a caboose. They were union, so they had to be part of the train. but they weren't. But they didn't have a caboose to work on, so they were brakemen for the caboose, who sat in the engine compartment with a clipboard. It got away from me. That shadow got way far away from me right then. Oh well. That splash right there is going to mess things up. We'll be all right. Let me dry this real quick and then we can ink it. Morning, Vishnu Kanar on the vertical. I see you over there. EOTs ended the use of cabooses. He says, when I was in Job Corps, a lot of guys came from Texas to Guthrie to take welding and would work at train tankers place down there. Wish I had taken welding in high school. I had some welding experience because my friend Brian, his dad had a welding machine in the garage, a farm welder in the garage, and we would play with it. And so I had a little bit of welding experience, not enough to call myself a welder. But when I got a job at a fab shop running a saw, I got bored, and I would reach over to the welding machine and I would turn it on and practice with it. And I learned to weld, but I was only a API 1104 welder. I was a structural welder, not a pipeline welder. Did that for what, 5 or 10 years. Promote me away from it, and that's all I wanted to do. Sure, I'm on camera.
Says when he got his welding certs, he paid well. That honestly, guys are starting today around the same as casualty welders were making.
Well, yeah. But yeah, because the dollar's not worth as much as it was then. It has the same buying power. You know, as a structural welder, I started off making $15 an hour. I think they're making $20 an hour as structural welders now. I was making $15 an hour 30 years ago. Almost 30 years ago.
It was his dad and 2 workers putting into it.
Yeah, that buying power, that dollar dying off is sure enough. It's frustrating when you look back and say I was making $50,000 a year, which at the time was pretty good money for a shop welder. You know, I didn't have to go out on the pipeline. I didn't have to own my own equipment. Now those guys, that was after 10 years of doing it. Now those guys are starting at those wages. You know, they can't afford a house. The Inglewood Railway was the last company to use the rails up into the trees. For 100 years they did it and then from 1917 to 2017, and in 2017 they had an accident that had 3 fatalities, and they put an end to it. The cars still exist, but the companies that focus strictly on this have dwindled away because of how dangerous it is, and because of how it's so much cheaper just to use trucks, just use the big semi-trailers. Flat cars, if they do it today, it's just a flat car with rails on it. It's not the skeleton frame like what they did in the early 1900s. Most of those skeletons have either been scrapped or they're in museums now. Today's the 6th of July. Wow. This year's flying by. And since that's the same with Joe, says it's disheartening when he sees that what he made at 21 versus what guys starting at 21 are making now. You know, that's the same with everything. You look at teachers, for instance. My wife's a school teacher. You know, what she's making now versus what she was making when she started out, versus what they're hiring new teachers at. And that's very frustrating. That's enough to make you want to quit being a teacher just so you can start again and make the new rates. So anyway, there's my version of it compared to the photograph. Let's see it from my perspective. I'm going to cut this bookmark or something. It's always in my way. Let's see this thing from my perspective. So there it is. There it is from my perspective. So that's what I did this morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Tomorrow, what do we have tomorrow? What could it be? What could it be? What could it be? Oh, the suspense. The suspense is what gets you. Claudia, is it still hot where you are? I started talking about the suspense, and I remembered that time when you couldn't hear what I was saying because it was too hot. This is an aspen tree. This is one of the largest organisms on the planet, because when you see a forest of aspen trees, it's likely the same organism. It's likely one big organism connected by a root structure. All the different trees you see are springs off the same root structure, making it a single organism. And so this is considered, if not the largest organism on the planet, one of the largest organisms on the planet. So we'll talk about that and more fun aspen tree facts tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. Texas time when I sketch this little grower. So you're going to want to set your notification bell so you don't miss that. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. Claudia says it's a bit less, but at the end of the week, it's that hot again. Oh my goodness. We had actually some rain, and it came through with the hope of cooling the place down, and basically just raised the humidity 5 points. So, you know, that's exactly what we need, is just enough rain to raise the humidity for 5 points so that the heat feels more warm. The word I was looking for was oppressive. So the heat feels more oppressive. So guys, thank you so much for joining me. I do look forward to this every morning when I get to art with my besties. It makes me run down the stairs and just to be here with you guys. Claudia, Joe, Rick, and Pamela, Mom and Dad, thank you so much for keeping the chat alive this morning. Yeah, Joe says it's 92% of the 92% humidity is where he is now, and you're within 5 points of us, 2 to 5 points of us where you are. So, because you're right at the end of the Gulf Stream. You're right at the north end of the Gulf Stream. So, fun times. It's hot in Houston in the summertime. That's a complete shock. So, guys, again, thank you so much for joining me. Be sure and tune in tomorrow, same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. And then we dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing, because when they see me dancing, I will know that the lag is caught up with the stream, and that will mean that I won't get cut off mid-sentence when I'm talking. Gives everybody a chance to say hello and goodbye to each other, ask any questions they may have, give you a chance to click the clicky thingies this way if you're on the horizontal, or this way if you're on the vertical. But the most important thing that it does is it means that I don't get cut off mid-sentence, because being cut off mid-sentence is